Hello, everybody. Neil, being everybody. Welcome to Existent. Oh my God, see the Neil's Existential Minds. We were just talking about you, Neil. I said, "Oh, the cool guy's here." So welcome to Quantum Witch Cafe tonight, and being joined by Geraldine Orozco. She is an amazing woman in the experiencer community, and she creates a safe space for experiencers and does a lot of healing. So, do you want to tell everybody that's watching now and later what you do and who you are?
Absolutely. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me on here and hosting this space. It's really an honor to be here, and the work that you're doing in disseminating this information is amazing. So thank you, Priscilla. Secondly, what do I do? Well, I'm a certified hypnotherapist. I'm a quantum energy healer, pranic energy healer. I am a feng shui instructor, and I practice Qigong and I teach Qigong, and I'm owner of Bay Area Meditation here in San Francisco, California. So we teach corporate meditation and also wellness programs like Qigong as well. But my primary work, 9 to 5, is doing hypnotherapy and something called DNA reprogramming, which is something that I created as a result of my psychic abilities activating after a life-changing experience in 2013. So my primary work now is doing that, and also writing a book on DNA origins and the hybridization program, with focus on how our genetics, holographic DNA, plays a role in our evolution and our interaction with ET consciousness.
I love it. And I'm so excited you're writing a book because I started a book club. So,
Oh, cool. Hopefully
you
mine
know,
makes it out
it'll be nice
soon.
to get you on again when it releases so we can talk about it.
Wonderful.
Wow, that's a lot. And I know the DNA programming stuff is very cool and it's helped me a lot. When I found my friend recommended your YouTube channel, I was in the middle of like a really bad postpartum depression.
Wow.
So I was doing it just kind of like the videos that called to me,
Hmm.
and then I started doing you do 30-day challenges. I feel like you do them quite often. So I'm familiar. I think the first meditation I did with you was last year, and you had the rainbow nebula behind you, and it was a light language. Like,
Okay.
so
Hmm.
that was the
Yeah.
first time that I did one of your meditations.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
yeah, it was like I've been following you ever since. So
It's
there's
so
this.
great to connect with listeners and with viewers and people that are getting into the work, because it just takes our conversation to another level, because you really understand what's important about this, what we're talking about. ET's consciousness, our multidimensional bodies, all of it plays a role in our understanding of the bigger picture. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's great. And it explains a lot to people that are experiencers, especially people that are curious about what is kind of known as the hybridization program. So, for somebody that might not be familiar with it, and for people that are just kind of diving into the subject, how would you explain the hybridization program with extraterrestrials or interdimensionals, whatever they may be?
Yeah. So that's a really big question, actually. But to make it more concise into a concept, what the hybridization program is basically the utilization of our genetic material, our core database of information in our genetic code. And it is utilized and mixed with other species, other genetic codes, other levels of consciousness, manifestations in other dimensional planes, in order to create more organisms, more living beings, living organisms. And the purpose for this program is several. There's several sides to it, but primarily it's creating new organisms which are sustaining an organic matrix which we're living in and participating in. So it is a natural part of the evolutionary process, but there are also many different, let's call them agendas, that partake in this process. And a lot of these agendas are, some of them can be perceived as good, which means that their alterations, their genetic modifications are made to enhance the evolutionary process of our organism. And some of them are made to do the opposite, to counter create, perhaps more destructive, more parasitic consciousness. And both of them operate in a similar manner in which it is genetic code that is taken from the host, which would be, let's say, myself, and anyone else that has experienced that. And it's utilized to create these children. And there is a very specific process to how this goes, and we can dive deep into that in just a moment. But I will leave it there in terms of the explanation of what it is as an overview.
Okay, awesome. So I'm curious about the process because with my experience, things have kind of like come back in like dream recall. Hello, Vinny. And I think I said hi to Neil, kind of. I just said his name. But thanks for hopping in. We have, I think that if you're not familiar with Disclosure Team, he's doing like great work.
Amazing.
Spreading and awareness and all that. So, and he actually
Wonderful.
kind of inspired me to do this. So,
Oh,
to do
wow,
the
great.
channel and speak out against it. So, but yeah, so it seems very scattered in my mind. And with other women I've spoken to, like probably within the past year or the past, honestly, since maybe March. So not very long. Women that I've talked to about it, like they don't know what is going on. Like what is you said there's a specific process, right?
Hmm.
Do you go into that?
Yeah,
Because I want to know, and I'm
absolutely.
sure other people would like to know too.
Absolutely. So the process is a lifelong agreement. When you discover that you're a part of the hybridization program, and people discover it at different stages in their life, and there's different stages in the participation. But depending on where you're at, um, sometimes you will discover it through a presentation. So, for example, you're meeting the children and you have a conscious experience that happens. Other times, you just have these strange memory recalls in dream time, or you're becoming lucid in dream time where you become aware of that. And some people just have side effects where it's a combination of dreams and also physical side effects, anomalies, sometimes medical anomalies, where they are, trying to understand what's happening. And a lot of times these side effects that are a result of the hybridization program are affecting the physical body. So the process of the hybridization begins at an early age. Usually the age of 5 is when the beginning, the first contact begins. And it is an implantation process in which there is an implant that is created from the genetic information of the host combined with artificial intelligence, which is also etheric, and implanted into the body. The body is multidimensional. So a lot of times you will feel the implant in the body, but it will affect several layers of your multidimensional body, not just the physical. And what it does is it kind of monitors the organism to kind of see when it's ready to become a host for the program. Secondly, the second part is the insemination process. And by the time that the host is ready to begin the first insemination, which obviously happens in the later years after puberty, um, for example, in my case, it began at the age of 16, where I had the first insemination. It is a mechanical insemination in some cases. Sometimes it is in a petri dish, and other times this is something that is actually created. It is a created union between two specimens that are made to create this being. A lot of times, those unions are done much later in the stage of the host's life, when they are already sexually active. When they're children or when they're younger, let's say at the age of 16, usually they are just taken for the genetic information, and it's then done in a laboratory. Okay. But what happens is that usually in the insemination process will occur. So after the specimen is combined, genetically modified, it is inserted into the womb, and it is gestated, usually up until 3 months. And after 3 months, that fetus is highly developed. It's developing at a different rate, higher rate than a normal human fetus,
Oh, wow.
and removed into an incubation tank. And these incubation tanks have an artificial umbilical cord, which are creating a lifeline inside of these artificial womb type cases. And the program is vast in that there are women potentially can participate with one hybrid. They can create one hybrid in their life, or some, I've heard people up to 49 hybrids have been created.
Yeah.
So in my case, I have 24 hybrid children. And I discovered that the children were being created in different kinds of programs. Depending on the kind of program it is, it depends what stage in your life you're participating in that program, and it depends the process of insemination. Sometimes the insemination process can be quite traumatic for people because they're becoming conscious, and it's usually because they have a lot of genetics that are activated. It means they're very psychic, they're incredibly
Yeah.
empathic. So a lot of times they will become aware when they're taken, and they're not just forgetting or disconnected from themselves, and they will be able to witness what they're experiencing. And so as they are witnessing what they're experiencing, sometimes, of course, because we're not understanding that this is actually something that's taking place for a very long time, and we'll get into that in a moment, it can be very disassociating and very shocking and traumatizing. And so the next part is that there are other governmental programs as well, terrestrial programs, and they are also very much interested in our genetic lineages. The genetic lineages are a combination of centuries of information, but centuries not in a linear format.
Right.
Rather, this is kind of like an orb of information that we're tapping into, and each one of us have a complex cocktail of genetic information. So they are quite interested in your history, in the records of the information. And this data is basically utilized in order to create clones, which is slightly different than hybrids. Other
Wow.
programs, I'll just finish. After the insemination process, and I'll go into those in just a minute in depth, but we'll have a presentation after the gestation. So once the child is incubated, sometimes there will be several visits for the mother to connect with the child again. Okay. And this is very necessary for the process and the evolution of the child, either to, breastfeed the child or just simply connect with the child and be with the child for some time. And then at a later stage, they will be presented. And a lot of people, for some reason, are beginning to remember those experiences where they are introduced to these children that are a combination of their genetics and other genetics, but they can recognize them. And as they're connecting with them, sometimes they get their memories back, sometimes they're confused, they don't recognize, they don't understand what's happening, but it's an incredibly powerful part of the process. And finally, the final part, after the presentation, usually the host has the option of either continuing to connect with that child or disconnecting entirely. So this is kind of the process of the hybridization program.
Wow. Oh, a couple like jolts of when you get surprised and you get like that jolt and like right here in your stomach. A couple
Yeah.
of those because you said 5, and a couple of people I've talked to recently have had that experience at that age, and that's when I had my experience. So when you said that, I was just like, it felt like a punch in the stomach.
Yes.
So
Yeah. I know.
I don't know how else to
In the
put it.
support, yeah, in the support group, it's every time it's the same thing. I haven't seen anything earlier than 5 in terms of actual interactive contact.
Right.
So it's really interesting. Yeah. And there's a reason for that, but we'll go into that in just a moment.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Like, yeah, because I'm meeting a lot of people, and a lot of them are like they've been kind of like lucid dreamers from a young age. Like you said, the psychic abilities happen. And when that is kind of like activated, I feel like that opens them up to so much because they're so young at the age of 5. It opens them up to other entities that are earthbound as well. So that's kind of a little nerve wracking. And like let's see, I'll put the comment up. So Neil says it's tied to sleep paralysis questions. And that's how my memories first started coming back. And after my first sighting when I was 5, I started getting sleep paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they would come as either angels or demons, pretty much. But that's kind of what I was taught, right? Growing up Catholic. So it's just interesting, like that. Like people, I feel like people know the difference between like a regular, like physical sleep paralysis, like the biological cause. But when you wake up and you have these marks on you, and it's the one you can't shake. It's the nightmare you can't shake, or it's the dream that you can't
Mm-hmm.
shake. And obviously, people have dreams. They're like, oh, that felt so real. But when it has these experiences coming to you, um, it tends to it's different. You know what I mean? It's different than a scary dream or a nightmare.
It's quite different, yes. And you know, in my experience, I've had sleep paralysis. I can count on my hand how many times I've had them. But um, what I notice is that a lot of times these kinds of experiences, they're not always combined with sleep paralysis. So sometimes there's and this is why in psychology in the scientific community, they tend to dispel these ideas of ET contact because they think it's just sleep paralysis. But a lot of experiencers also are having the contact without sleep paralysis. So it's really important to note that that is sometimes a part in
Mhm.
that, but sometimes it's not. And that's actually the part that we want to study, that we want to go into.
Right.
Because for sleep paralysis, it's easy for the chemicals in the brain to create these hallucinations
Right.
and these things, right?
Right.
And the scientific community wants to completely dispel that, like it's just a hallucination, there's nothing else actually happening. But from the etheric point of view, there's a lot happening. I mean,
Yeah.
we're entering into other dimensional planes and we're beginning to interact with those. So yeah, so it's something that it's so hard, but the more contactees that come out and talk about their experiences in detail help us formulate a different way of looking at these kinds of experiences, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you said you wanted to elaborate on something a little bit more as
Oh
part of the
yeah.
process.
Yeah, well, there's many directions that we can take. This is a very complex topic, so there's many parts of it that we can dissect. Um, but is there anything specific that you
Yeah.
want to go into?
So, why do they wait till you're 5? Um,
Okay, great.
that's the first question.
So, yeah. So at the age of 5 is usually where the child is fully developed in their etheric body. Okay.
Uh,
And so the child has their entire system open. Their chakras are open. Their chakras, because what happens with trauma, what happens with the input of a lot of programming, you know, as through emotional programming that we're taking on from parents inside the womb, and even out of that, immediately we begin to adjust our perception energetically, how we are feeling our presences in the world. And it is a very complex psychological uh, program that begins to occur in the mind of the body, that it's not just psychological, it's affecting the multidimensional body because the chakras begin to either open or they get stagnant or they get closed or paralyzed or they will stop moving certain ways because of the trauma that's occurring. So at the age of 5, usually the child has a fully developed multidimensional body. They're quite active in these spaces. They begin to access their intuition through their third eye. You know, they can begin to see a lot more. They can understand what they're seeing and interact with them. So they're more connected to this physical three-dimensional body, and they begin to activate the higher levels. The activation starts from the higher levels down to the lower levels.
okay.
And by the age of 5, usually the root chakra is quite complete, okay? And so if the child undergoes any kind of traumas or something, it'll enhance the way the child feels. So
Mm.
in contact, this is the best and most purest moment for the child to begin to interact. And the code of the child at that moment is, um, let's just say, it's intact and not programmed yet.
Oh, okay.
By
That
the
makes
age of 7, the child is already programmed. Okay, so
sense.
that between the ages of 5 and 7 are actually the most important because this is the development of the subconscious mind and the brain, where the child begins to input all kinds of programs for emotions, how it's going to survive flight or flight programs, how it sees the feminine and masculine energy, how it's interacting in the world, whether if it's safe or not. And it's learned all of that from its parents or the lack of the presence of the parents. So it plays a tremendous role in how they perceive things. And sometimes these children very much remember their contact at that age. But of course, because, you know, a lot of adults don't know any of this, they just say, oh, that's a nice dream or a nice imagination that you
Right.
had, and it's quite discounted. But it's very important to pay attention to what our children are saying,
Okay.
because a lot of things that they're expressing and experiencing is actually occurring on other dimensions. So it's very important to pay attention to that. So now there are, of course, other nefarious, deeper programs that they take advantage of the purity of that child as well in that genetic code in order to create darker programs, more parasitic consciousness as well. But the same is true for both. And what it depends on is the agreement that the child's soul has made in
Right.
order to experience either one of those things. Those agreements have been made already. So that's something that sometimes it's hard for people to understand.
Exactly. Because it's hard to tell people about like soul contracts, basically. I've studied it. I've been like, since I could read, I've read anything fringe or paranormal or, any UFO stuff I could get my hands on because of my experience. And obviously this has made me a really weird, deep person. Like I've never been like the kid on the playground doing cartwheels because I've always been like a deep person. I don't know, like a deep thinker. And it wasn't until I started, coming out of like the broom closet, so to speak. Like I'm not like I haven't been like in a coven or anything. I've been like ordained a witch. I don't know how that works, but it's the easiest way to explain to people that I have some spiritual beliefs you might not understand. So part of it was, I learned the whole Akashic stuff. After my brother died, I had a visitation, and I thought it was angels, but they were doing energy work on me. Um,
Mm.
and now I don't know, like
Wow.
where they were from, or like that's maybe the easiest way for it to explain it. And then you read about the work of these higher dimensional, interdimensional beings, or like the higher vibrational extraterrestrial races, and you're like, wow, like was that what I was seeing this whole time? And then you go back in history all the way
Yeah.
to Samaria, and you're like, I was hanging out with the extraterrestrial last night, not an angel. So, but thank you because they did help.
Right.
Yeah, so it is strange how it affects people. And it's not strange to me, but other people find it strange because, like you said, like the empathic qualities turn on. And if you're not in a supportive area and or in a supportive household when this happens, I think that, it can go like two different ways. What I experienced is I had like these scarier experiences with the grays, right? The mean ones, the naughty ones, the ones that people don't like to have around. And then almost like the next night or a few nights later, I would have almost like a more higher vibrational entity come in and almost do damage control because my family was not supportive. So I think that there is that ebb and flow to the universe, but not everybody gets that.
Yeah.
And now that I'm understanding a lot more, I just like they're just working basically. Like you're not like they're doing their job in a way, and it's hard to get past that, and hard to really be like, oh well, I did kind of, I remember having an experience, and I was like, well, why, And they're like, well, you said it was okay,
Hmm.
and yeah,
Right.
people don't understand that. And you said listen to what your children say. A lot of this is generational, right? Like a lot of people that
Absolutely.
are experiencers come from experiencers.
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
and even my son now, he's 4 and he's had these crazy dreams since he was 2.
Wow.
He's seen spirits before, so I make sure that I listen to his dreams because nobody
Oh.
listened to mine until recently. So, and I was like,
Wow.
if somebody just would have been like, I understand, like I'm obviously like I let him tell me, but he's had some pretty strange dreams that for his age, it's just it's insane like what he
Wow.
has dreams of. He had this dream where he was like, oh, I had a dream last night, mama, and the earth was black and the people was black and this tower crashed and the electricity was out and the cars were black. And I was like,
Traveling.
okay, prophecy, baby. I don't know what to think of that, but I
Hmm.
wrote it. I said,
Hmm.
I recorded it. I was like, tell me again. And
Wow. That's so
just so I
great
can
that you're
think
doing
about it.
that.
Because, like some people astral travel at a young age.
Oh, yes. And that's what he's doing. He's traveling
Yes.
for sure. When it's that level of clarity and detail, it's very important to, I mean, that's so great that you're recording that. I wish more parents would do that.
I think it's going to be the newer generations, honestly, because
Yes.
people are opening so much. It's
Yeah.
historic moments right now that whether people think it's I don't know, a conspiracy by the government or not, more people are accepting that, the possibility of there being
Hmm.
extraterrestrials or even interdimensional, which is people would never talk about before.
Yeah.
It just kind of took like the government saying like, okay, yeah, you got me, kind of, and then more people are jumping on it. And then there's the people like, we don't trust the government. Like I didn't need that, but I want more people to understand that it's happening, and I think it's happening more often than people think. Like the whole,
Yeah.
maybe they're not remembering yet, but I think a lot of people are getting memories back right now
Yeah.
for some reason.
Well, a lot of these bloodlines have been genetically modified for centuries, and again, what we think is our past lives, these are simultaneous lives that we're living. And in those simultaneous lives, aspects of our genetic code are being activated and also continuously recording, information, experiences, the expansion of this organism, if you see yourself as an organism. And it's very interesting. But what every experience that we're having, because in fact we're fractals of source, of
Mhm.
that infinite consciousness, and in that infinity, when we come into these dimensions, these lower dimensional planes that we're in right now, we fragment into fragments, and it's those fragments that are living out in these alternate dimensions, the different lives, experiences, and all of them feed into this base code, which makes up the essence of what we are. So when this hybridization is occurring, it's taking all of that information. It's a snapshot of all of the fragments of yourself that are utilized to inform the next evolutionary stage of the organism as a whole, because we forget that we're one.
Yeah.
And what that means is that even the new beings that are coming into this incarnation timeline, they are somehow being genetically modified, where the code is being activated each time more and more to match the movement that we're going through in the universe. Because the entire universe is also evolving. It's a natural part. We're always moving.
Yeah.
So we have to continue that process. Now, some of this evolutionary process is artificial, in that it is mechanically made, and what that means is that some genetic information is deactivated, right? So when
Mhm.
the human is incarnating into the body, they're not recalling, they're not remembering the awareness of all of these lives, all of what they were right before they came in. And so our life now becomes an opportunity to unlock that genetic code. And that genetic code can be unlocked through healing, through reintegration of those fragments. That's why past life regression, that's why healing, that's why trauma work is incredibly important, to begin to activate that DNA. First, you have to clean up what's been done in this lifetime, and you'll notice that there are repetitive patterns that are coming down the family. And ET contact is no different, actually, because the lineages that we are agreeing with in order to procreate these organisms, it's a vibrational frequency that matches our frequency, our signature. And it's something that we've been holding on to for generations. So, for example, our mother, our grandmother, great grandmother, all of them had contact in my family. And now my entire family, I mean, all of the women in my family have had contact. Um, so it's really amazing that, when I came public, like from one day to the next, I mean, it was just kind of crazy for my family, because we never even thought about having these conversations. But then everybody started coming out of the woodwork. Oh, you know what, Geraldine? Actually, I
Yeah.
have had that contact.
Because
You
there's a
know,
safe space now. Like
exactly. It's like
people
now,
are
now
going to
we,
feel like they're crazy. Like
yes,
I remember being in
yes,
high school and I had this crazy experience. I actually
yeah,
woke up outside on the other side of the fence after I called it a dream, but I was awake. So I think I was trying to rationalize what happened. And I said, Mom, I need to go to a psychologist. I'm afraid to
hmm,
sleep because at this point, when I was a teenager, I just got like that feeling again in my stomach. 15, 16.
hmm,
The
hmm,
experiences were very heavy at that time. And
hmm,
she wouldn't take me. So Nikki actually has a great question. Now, Nikki is the one that actually was like, you have to check out Geraldine. She's amazing. She's an experiencer, and she's also has some hybridization
Wow.
experiences.
Hmm.
And her and I met in Alaska. We were neighbors. We didn't really we knew each other. We liked each other, but we didn't bond until last summer, I want to say. We really bonded because she was like, she saw a craft in the daytime. Um, and that's when I was like, yeah, girl. Like, then we both started doing like initiating contact, and more stuff started coming back to us.
Oh,
And it
wow.
just so
Hmm.
happens that she gets an experience and will tell me, and I've either had experience that same night or like the day before or after.
Mm.
So she said, I would love to hear about the hybridization program and its connection with endometriosis.
Wow, great question. Nikki, thank you so much for being here and connecting. Um, yeah, so this is a question that I get a lot because a lot of women that have contact experience, and how do we know that? It was a survey that was done. And the survey took thousands of women involved that claim to have had that contact experience. And they were asking if they had endometriosis, if they had any kind of gynecological problems. And in my practice, when I work with women, this tends to be one of the main markers because what happens is that they have miscarriages, but they are like blighted ovums, which means that there is no fetus. There is only just the lining. And sometimes it's left intact, but there is no fetus inside. Sometimes the lining it will be like a miscarriage, but again, there will be no fetus left behind. And so, what that means is that the menstruation cycle and hormonally, this really affects the women because we're becoming pregnant. And some of the cases they are partnered with their partners, and some of the cases they're not. And this is something that happened to me, that I became pregnant when I was not partnered. And so the strange thing about that is when I would go to the doctor and get checked for that, thinking, what happened, because it usually feels like a miscarriage because it's very painful and
Yeah.
it's a lot. And so you need to go to the doctor. You can't just ignore that, otherwise you're going to have complications. And usually they will proceed with the DNC in order to remove all of that out of the womb, clearing it up. And so, what's interesting in these cases is that for a woman that has had a DNC, she will have scarring inside of the uterus, because of that, because oftentimes the scraping, it affects the uterus lining. And a lot of times when doctors go and they do that work, they discover that scarring has already been there. So they're like, well, what number miscarriage is this?
Yes.
Because, or abortion, because you have this scarring in the womb. And the woman says, I've never had it before. And so it's kind of strange because there seems to be scarring either here by the umbilical cord or inside of the uterus on the very back of the uterine wall. And it seems to be very specific, like incisions and markings within the uterus. The other part is that for endometriosis, where it becomes very tough lining inside of the uterus, oftentimes this happens as a result of trauma, like a lot of trauma within the womb, within the uterus. And so cysts are also developing, like a lot of cysts, not just a small amount of cysts, but because there seems to be overactive hormonal activity, which means that you're getting pregnant a lot, and the pregnancy cycles are, closer together, closer and closer together. So it can be very difficult for a woman to process this because when you go to the doctor will not know how to respond to that. A lot of times they say it's stress.
Right.
Sometimes they think that, you want to have a child so much, so you're kind of
Yeah.
creating the hormones in order to create false pregnancies in the body. And for a lot of women, that's not the case. And so the question is, how do we deal with that? Because this is, I think, one of the most important parts of the hybridization program, because it's physical evidence. It's physical evidence that something is occurring within the womb that we might want to take a second look at, just to understand what's happening to us. And it's not from a perspective to cause fear or a feeling of helplessness for our human race, but in fact to understand how we end up making these contractual agreements and how active we are in the interdimensional plane. These hybridization programs have been happening since the origin of life on this planet. We look at Mary Magdalene. We look at all the Virgin Marys that have been giving, birthing life on this planet. And this is a time, an age-old story. The women are still experiencing this, and we just don't listen to it. We kind of just, we think that science has caught up with that, but it hasn't. There is no explanation for this kind of contact. So that's a very interesting question, Nikki. Thank you so much for asking. And unfortunately, it is something that women do have to endure sometimes. This tends to be a common thing that comes up. But what I would like to say about that is that it's not something that will affect long term if we begin to heal our body. And it's not just healing the body, it's changing the vibrational frequency so we can stop having the participation. Once we feel that we're done participating in those programs, we can end that contact. So that's what I would say for any woman that doesn't want to continue experiencing this.
Thank goodness. Yeah. And I think it's very terrifying for people. Not everybody can come to terms with like, well, this is just what they're doing. Have you noticed any connections with early menopause and women that have been part of the hybridization program?
That's an interesting question. Not enough to say that is a case, but I am currently launching another survey
Okay.
with an application that I've just finished developing. So I will be launching that, and that will be a wonderful resource to understand more in depth women that are experiencing this, so we can understand how to navigate it, and trying to pull in from the medical field as well,
Yeah.
doctors that are willing to at least listen and to just observe these cases to understand what's happening, because in a lot of the medical, and I've read them, I've read all of the medical research papers that were created for contact. None of them touch the hybridization program. None of them want to even come close to that,
Mm.
because it just feels too far out there. And I do note
Yes.
the same in the UFO community, that
Oh,
this is
absolutely.
sometimes a topic that is just kind of like, oh, let's just put that,
Yes.
to the side. And I think
Yeah,
it's actually the one of the most important topics of the ET subject,
absolutely.
because it plays a role in so much, of our history and our future.
Absolutely. And it's I always tell people like, like that are kind of like at our level of what we know is happening. And then I compare it to like entry level people. They needed this whole, physical disclosure thing through the government to happen. They needed the New York Times article. And even if it's all staged or something, it's one of those things where they need that. Not everybody does, but to me, if somebody can open up to the possibility where before they thought it was all like tinfoil hat, blah, blah, blah stuff, to me, when that's going to raise their vibration because they're opening their mind. And if you expand your
Right.
consciousness in that way, you're going to have other experiences, and
Yes.
they're not all going to be scary or low vibrational. Like I've kind of got I finally stopped being afraid. There was a point where I couldn't see like um like a little emoji gray, like the total like stereotypical gray, right?
Hmm.
I I would see that as a little girl, and I would just get this, like, I would be terrified automatically, and I
Interesting.
knew that if I would
Hmm.
think about them, that I would have an experience. And that ties
Hmm.
to the whole consciousness, like, connection thing. We are so unaware of how what we think has a vibration, even though we know our brain waves are waves, and there's even more to it than that. That's just what we know
Yeah,
right now.
that's right.
So, it's pretty, exciting that people are finally getting on board and coming forward a little bit, but this is the next, thing we have to shatter
Yeah,
experiences.
exactly. And a lot statistically, a lot of the contact that people report is actually positive. you know. I think it's just our level of understanding and, of course, our fear of the unknown that causes us limitation when it comes to these topics. But yeah, I mean, exactly, existential minds. You know, a lot of people don't make that connection, but it's actually one of the most powerful stories. And of course, Mary's not the only one.
Yeah.
All of the great saints or, leaders were born in that same way. They were born from a virgin, right? From the Virgin Mary. And so this is not just, of course, there's many profound esoterical meanings to that as well that we also need to study and understand. But from this other perspective, if we look at the Book of Enoch, the Emerald Tablets, the
Yeah.
Book of Gilgamesh, if we look at all of these main original scriptures that talk about how there was breeding from the beings of the stars that descended down from the skies, breeding with the earth people. Okay, so this is something even in the Hopi tradition, even in the
Mm.
Incas, even the Aymaras in South America, all the way to India. I mean, every single part of the world has this kind of understanding in their ancient scriptures. And so what's very interesting about that is that it's something that has been brought down. But when we start looking at modern day evolutionary process, when we start following the genetics, historically, how the gene has developed into the different races in the planet, you know that we have an origin point, which is in
Right.
Mesopotamia. And from that origin point, these different lineages, which when you overlap them with blood types, which is a research that I did this past year, past 2 years, is very interesting because I think our blood types play a tremendously important role in the kind of acknowledgement of our contact that we're having. People
Absolutely.
that are Rh negative, they recall their memory more than any other of the blood types.
Right.
And, you know, it's one of the oldest blood types and the ones that is most difficult to account for historically. We don't know where it stemmed from. And it's very interesting. In my research, what I have understood, and this is not just research. So let me go back to my story really quickly just to fill in the blanks of how I come across this, because in 2013 I had a conscious, physical experience where I was taken out of my bedroom window into a craft by six grays that I saw in the flesh in front of me. And they took me into a craft in which they introduced me to a lot of information. I saw my aunt there. My aunt was taken the same night. She was in her nightgown, in paralysis and out of it completely. And this is the night that I was introduced to my Pleiadian lineage, where I was in the Pleiades as another aspect of myself, um, doing something there. Um, it goes very deep into. I'm not trying to just be,
No, I'm smiling because
obscure.
I had similar,
Really, yeah,
yeah,
that's
and Nikki
amazing.
as well. Like they showed me this thing that was like I made it with another one, another being, but it wasn't
Wow,
like a body. It was like an energy being. I was super weird, and it's the first time I ever said that. Besides getting, I talked to a gentleman. I get readings from a gentleman that is open to that sort of stuff. But yeah, so don't.
wow.
If you see me smiling, it's because I'm like, okay,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not going crazy. I don't want you to think I'm like, smiling.
No, 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 I don't. But I also don't want to be so vague because, these topics they deserve a lot of complexity.
Absolutely.
And there is a lot of details behind them. Like your story, for example, which is incredible because I hear it all the time that people have these contact experiences and they're shown their other life and their participation in their main bloodline
Right.
families,
It's
probably
crazy.
the one that they were at before they incarnated
Right.
into the
Yeah.
body. Exactly. So for you, was it Pleiadian who you
Yeah.
connected with?
Yes, that
Okay.
was the first
Okay.
one,
Amazing.
and then it was Arcturian after that. But yes, back to your story. I'm
Thank you.
sorry. I just didn't want you to think I was smiling,
No, no,
be
no.
a jerk or anything. I want people to understand that I am genuine and I believe you, and I'm smiling because I've heard it too from other people. So you
Oh,
you
I
were
know.
introduced to other aspects of yourself, right?
That's right. That's right. So I was a Pleiadian elder as part of a group and of four of them, four or five of them, I think it was. And they were in the Pleiades, and I went to the Pleiades to the planet Maya, because the constellation has
Yeah.
seven main planets, and then we went to Maya. And apparently my name was Alcyon, which is an old lineage from one of the oldest lineage in this constellation. Alcyon is like the biggest planet of all the planets there in that constellation. And so what happened is that as I was introduced to myself, I was teaching to thousands and thousands of people on this planet Maya. And I didn't understand what that meant until now. If you look at my life now, what I do now, it's exactly what I was doing there in that lifetime, just in a different way. But I had no idea. I couldn't even imagine in a million years that I would be speaking publicly about this back
Yeah.
then. That wasn't even crossing my mind, right? So I was also introduced to the hybrid children in that experience, and I met them for the first time. And having that contact with them, all of the memories started to come back. And it was just incredibly powerful seeing these hybrids. These are a combination of humanoid with grays, with reptilian, just the most incredible species that you can ever even imagine. Beautiful, with these incredible eyes and complex eyes and everything. But anyway, at that moment, I didn't know what to do with the information. When I got back, I was lying at the end of my bed, upside down, and my body was killing me. I had burns here, like my eyes were watery still. My entire body felt like I got hit from a truck because I literally went into a different dimensional plane. My
That's a
body,
thing too, right? Like the burning. Like I
yeah,
woke up and it felt like I had like sunburn one time.
exactly,
And people are like,
exactly.
"Oh, you got a sunburn?" They think, "Oh, well, you're brown. You're not gonna burn." I'm like, "Yeah, it's something else that you know."
Yes, yes, and it's from the craft and being in this because it's like an organic light craft. And
Yes.
I woke up with 3 dots on my arm from one day to the next. And so the interesting thing about that is that I wanted to call the police. I wanted to call a hospital because I was
Yeah,
thinking, who's going to help me deal with who handles
right.
intergalactic law? That was my
Yeah.
initial, as silly as that sounds. That's my earth brain trying to conceptualize what I had just
Yeah.
experienced.
You want help. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And as a result of that experience, I developed in that day these psychic abilities where I began to see the multidimensional body. I began to be psychic about many things. And I couldn't even leave my house for 3 months after that. But it took me on a journey to try to question why. Why was this happening? And I am, of course, a meditation instructor. So I went deeper. And it took me 5 years to even muster up the guts, I guess you can say, to be able to talk to someone else outside of the 3 people in my life that knew about my contact then.
Mhm.
And it was MUFON. It was a lady at MUFON, and that's where I started to tell her, and she's like, "Oh yeah, this is high level stuff," she said to me, and that surprised me because I had no idea what any of this was about. And so I decided to get hypnotherapy, and that is when I started to channel the information. My question was why? Why? It took me back to Mesopotamia. It took me back to the origins. I saw these bloodlines that have developed into the royal families that we now know,
Yeah.
and all the way down to our presidency and the human race. And this is where I began to understand that the hybridization was not just about bringing new souls into the matrix, but it's about the genetic information, and it's about the fact that we can activate our genetic information. We can activate the codes. We can heal ourselves. We can
Yes.
activate our superpowers like intuition, telepathy, remote viewing. So many things that we're capable and that we must learn how to do. And it's part of the remembering and the deprogramming of the matrix that we have to break through, and which I did through my meditation that brought me to the vibrational frequency where I was able to be conscious in that contact
Yes.
experience because the contact was happening my whole life. But
Yes.
because of my vibration and my the traumas that I had in turn incurred through life, I wasn't able to link those two. I didn't have an awareness of our multidimensionality. So yeah, that's how that happened.
That makes a lot of sense. Because I did a past life regression and I was shown it was almost like a montage of like way back to like Atlantis and Lemuria, just like these different
Wow.
things.
Yep.
And I didn't understand it. I was like, well, some people have like their past life experience and they get like one, but to me it was seriously like a weird montage of just there till now. And so
Perfect.
much became clear, and it was just so that actually makes a lot of sense. I'm gonna say a quick hi to some people that joined that I didn't say
Yeah.
hi to yet. So I want to say hello to Jay Zen.
Oh,
Spaghetti's
yeah.
here. Anthony's here. Anthony has his own podcast too. He's probably gonna reach out to you after this because he it's called Indigo Sessions. So
Oh, wow.
he has a lot of amazing women on. So Anthony, you need to contact Geraldine for sure. And then
Thank
Prime
you.
Time. These are my two friends, Artemis and Josh. They are a UAP power couple. They met on they met through the UFO community on Instagram.
Oh,
So,
wow. That's
and
so great.
they like moved in. It's insane. It's the most romantic thing ever.
It's a
But
UFO love story.
yes, exactly. And it's funny because Josh and Artemis were two people that I told like everything to. And I remember I
Wow.
was friends with Josh first, and I told Josh everything, and he's like, "Don't worry, like I'm not freaked out," because I was just like, "Oh my god, I just told like this person that I'm only friends with online." And then he's like, "Well, you can tell Artemis too. She's a sweetheart, so she knew it." And it's just like baby steps to get your story out. I
Yes.
can't advocate. I have no right telling people like come forward with your stories if I'm not willing to give anything. So you definitely had like you paved the way for that for a lot of women. So
Thank
just wanted to
you.
let
I
you know
hope
that.
so. Thank you. That's a wonderful way to look at it. I am very pleased and I hope that that's the case.
It
And
really
it's
is.
true, ever since the documentary came out, I have so many women reaching out for me from every corner of the world. And it's really amazing how we are learning through each other's share. Because we learn about the technology, we learn about the processes that they went through, how they became aware of what was happening, what were they doing before they became aware. All of this is important in
Absolutely.
the education of mankind, really. We need to understand what that's about.
Absolutely. So you mentioned blood types, and
Hmm.
are you Rh negative?
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah,
interesting. Because I was reading a couple of different studies. You probably read the same ones, and it went like Rh negative, and then O bloodline, and then less and
exactly.
less. So
Exactly.
and I never understood. So I'm not Rh negative, but I'm O positive. But that could be like a different type of thing happening. It's not as old as Rh negative, but it's interesting that I always ask people their blood type now, and they say they've had an experience.
Yeah, no, me too. Most of South America is O, actually, O positive.
Interesting.
And I just recently in a presentation, who did I do that for? I did it for Neil Gower, who does Portal to Ascension.
Okay.
And we will be speaking again at his conference in March and April. Really, really great one. So check out his website to see those upcoming events. But um, it was a mapping of how these bloodlines, but the interesting thing about that is that we look at the Nazca skulls in Peru, okay? And when they did some genetic testing on those, they were able to find that they were indeed Rh negative. But the interesting thing about that is that that bloodline can be found in in the Basque region of Spain, which is the origin, and that's where my last name, Orozco, comes
Yeah.
from the Basque. There's a city called Orozco. That's our
Wow.
ancestors are there. So most of the bloodline in my family comes from this place, and it's interesting because somehow this Rh negative came from this part in Spain all the way to Peru and to Bolivia, to these areas here where we're
Yes.
finding a lot of these remains of these elongated skulls. So there is a part of history that we're still not aware of, and it's something that I dive into in my book. But this is a key to understand, how these genetics have been really modified. This is
Right.
not a jump of nature because it's a tremendous jump in how they
It's
have developed
fast,
so
right?
quickly. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's one of the newest bloodlines for this generation, meaning that all the information that is coming to surface, people that are becoming aware of their contact during this time, their blood is being activated by the current vibrational state of the universe right now, because the entire universe, we're moving through a trajectory in which we're passing the photonic belt now, and everything is speeding up for that reason. The universe moves in this trajectory of an infinity cycle, but it's also moving in a spiral. And through this movement, we are accessing the center point of that infinity cycle, and that means that things are faster. And it's like we're shifting from one level of dimensional plane into another dimensional plane. We're accessing through this window all dimensional planes at once. And this is why we're coming into that unity consciousness. It's such a powerful time right
Really,
now.
really.
By the time we go into the next phase of this, we're going to be reaching another level of evolution for human race. You know, later down this timeline, but 2040, 2050, we're going to be going into that second
Mm.
phase of this evolution. But for all humans that are living right now, the veil has thinned. It's
Oh,
already
yes.
there,
I
you
tell
know.
people this. I've been telling people, like, people have been contacting me. Like, people always come to me with their weirdness, right? What they think is weird. I don't think
Mhm.
it's because they come to me because I don't think it's weird, and they know that I'm not going to judge. Like, people are like, I saw grandpa. Like, this is a real, like, I saw my grandpa behind me while I was bathing the kids. He's dead. Like, stuff like that. And I told people, like, something happened last Halloween that was very powerful energetically.
Mhm.
And a lot of people, like, the veil never like went back because around certain times of year it's thinner, but it kind of stayed thin because I have so many people just waking up to what used to be extreme possibilities for them.
Mhm.
So I think it's
Yeah.
we're gonna have to
Yeah.
have I'm gonna have to have you back on just to talk about that because that's a
Yeah,
whole
that's
nother can of
exactly. You're
I don't want
right.
to say worms, but
Yeah.
it's good. It's just a whole process. Um, I do have a question about the hybrid children.
Yeah.
Um, so if somebody's getting fragmented memories, you said that when they work on their vibration and healing, they'll come into alignment to understand more. So when I first saw mine, I was probably trying to think of like the age, probably like not quite to like sixth grade, seventh grade time frame. We went to northern Arizona in a cabin, and I was outside stargazing, and there I saw a gray in the forest line. There was like a little backyard, and then there's the tree line, and it scared me. And I kind of got that, like, it knew it scared me, but then it turned into a little boy, and the little
Mm.
boy looked like the child you drew,
Oh, wow. Mhm.
and that child had continues to appear
Mhm.
in one way or another. So if I'm just wondering, like, are they waiting for me to like come into alignment
Well,
to
you're
actually?
already in alignment, my love. If you're seeing them, so interesting technology that they utilize is a shape shifting technology, and they also use something called screening. Where they cover or they project onto you an image that feels comfortable or familiar, and then they will come into their true form. Okay, so what you experienced was literally the shape shifting of this child,
That was
and
like,
it.
I thought I was going crazy. I was like, I'm not telling anybody. I must be tired. Like, I was young, trying to rationalize this thing.
Mhm.
Maybe I watched too many episodes of X Files or Sightings or something. Like, it was just. But I'm telling you, when I saw your drawing, it was like somebody punched me in the damn stomach because I was just like,
Wow.
they look like that. Do you know what I mean? And I
Yeah,
remember when
absolutely.
I finally got pregnant with a baby that would keep or stay. My
Mhm.
son, the
Mhm.
first thing I thought when I saw him wasn't, oh my gosh, it was, please let me keep him. Isn't that a weird thing
Wow.
to think? But now it makes sense.
Yes.
They normally don't. It's
Mhm.
very hard for experiencers to get pregnant. So now it makes sense. But at the time, I was like, what the hell's wrong with me? Shouldn't I be crying with love? Like, let me keep him.
Wow. That's, you know what? And just that is so important because a lot of women do have that experience. Yes, it is hard for them to get pregnant. They usually have to go through a lot. And it's very interesting the agreement that these women, we are making to produce these hybrids. It's because of the level of wisdom that we hold inside of the genetic code. But of course, the thing is that this is not just subject to a small group, right? In my understanding of this, I think everyone on this earth is part of the hybridization program, but
Absolutely.
we are not aware. of that. We are not aware, because a lot of the contact that occurs happens also in other etheric planes, like in the ninth and 10th dimensional plane. This is lucid dreaming, and also when we're astral projecting, we can also participate in the hybridization program on that level, because the genetic code is not just only the material form. It is your entire essence of your etheric multidimensional body is holding the same blueprint. So you can access it at different levels, and it depends on what you're going to be participating, creating. But the incredible thing about your story is that this child that you keep seeing obviously is presenting itself to you.
Yes.
Okay. And a lot of times it is in combination with the grays.
Yeah.
If it was a short gray, a lot of those short grays are really like artificial intelligence. They are
Right.
utilized and programmed to carry out a lot of the
Yeah.
dirty or the small
Yeah.
secretarial work, you can say, for these beings, and they're participating in many, if not
Right.
majority, of these programs. So the question is, who is running them behind the scene? Like, who is managing the grays that are presenting these
Right.
children? And so that's a question that I have asked a lot in terms of how to understand the programs better. But are they different? Is it different from the program, the terrestrial program? I think it's a matter of vibrational frequency in the range of what they're doing. But a lot of these humanoid type children are usually ones that are brought back into the reincarnation cycle. The children are kept on hybridization crafts, where they are, groomed and taught and developed into their abilities. Some of these children, they don't make it past a certain age. Some of these children grow up to be adults. But again, the timeline is different, because what matters is the soul, the essence of that organism, which can then be reinserted in the reincarnation cycle as a child. And then we see children being born with these incredible abilities to remember past lives, remember their ET lives, remember other planets, remember advanced physics, and sciences of the universe that we are not even privy to yet. These children are already born at the age of 5, 6, 7. They're talking these things, and it's not something that you can come up with from the movies or even in a book.
Yeah.
So these are children that have their genetic information already activated. And so this is the new human. This is the new next generation of children. We've had rainbow, indigo, crystal, all of those things. We now have another child. From the beginning of 2017 was another wave of hybrid children
You
that were
keep
being
saying
born.
these dates and ages, and every time you say it, it's not like it's like a jolt up my spine and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like just all up in the sushumna, like just like. So yes, that's very interesting. Is there a name for those ones yet? Because like you said, there's crystal, indigo, and
You know what? The name that I saw was actually a French word that I don't even know how to pronounce properly, but it's something like reconnaissance or
oh,
something like this. But what it means is um, the healing shift or something like this. I looked at the etymology of this word, and that's what I found it to be. But I think that they are children in which their genetic code is wide open, wider than any previous generation that we've
yeah,
experienced. They are very conscious. They're no longer, and if you see kids, I love working with kids. I work with kids a lot. And when you see how awake they are, I mean, in their teen years, in their childhood years, it's like they are like ascended masters. They are so grounded in their body, they're connected in their body, and they speak a wisdom that is just, it's humbling.
yes,
They have their facts straight. They don't buy into this social medias and mind control and social engineering. They're beyond that. And that's the beauty. We have to preserve that. We have to help
yes,
preserve that with the consciousness of education of the parents, because it's
absolutely,
us that have to learn now. The,
yeah.
the, the parents have to catch up to that evolution. So it's really powerful and beautiful what's happening. But as we see in our eyes, this is how the genes are changing and shifting as we go.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, my husband's funny. I say he's a muggle because he doesn't really. He's open. He's like he's like the person like a Gray would have to walk in and give him a high five for him to, get it. So I tell him all this crazy stuff, and he's just like, "You're turning our son into a weirdo," but then he'll be like, "But I'm okay with it." He had to do a speech thing, and his whole story was about UFOs. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like,
Wow. Oh my
it was.
gosh, that's so cute.
He only freaked me out once with the thing with the. He said that he went in an alien bubble one night, and I was like,
Wow.
no.
Oh
but
my
but I'm
gosh.
listening. I'm always listening to him. I don't try to put my thoughts into him, but I will listen to anything he has to
Yeah.
say. We are coming up on the hour, but I want to
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
hi to Big Willie, Alien Girl, Laura, Donna Marie, DJ, and I think I said hi to Spaghetti. I just like saying his name. And but can you answer one question
Yeah,
before we wrap
absolutely.
up?
Absolutely.
So this is from Spaghetti. He's a super cool guy. He's in a lot of the chats with people being more open minded. And he
Nice. Hi,
says,
Spaghetti Lee.
he says, can Geraldine elaborate more about the projecting or screening from the ETs? Is that to prevent the abductees from fearing them, and why?
Okay, well, fantastic question. Um, so the screening technology is taking memories from your mind and creating something that would be comfortable for you. Why is this created? It's created for several reasons, depends on the scenario. In the hybridization program, a lot of times this scenario is created for the purpose of insemination processes. So, for example, a species or a being, it can even be another human that needs to combine their genetic code with yours. They will screen image something that will be appealing to you, and the intercourse will occur. Okay. And a lot of people, men and women, they wake up from these kinds of dreams. Sometimes they are shocked and they experience PTSD because sometimes because of the level of consciousness of the human, they become aware of what's happening and the screen image begins to dissolve and the true
Mm,
form of the being or the person is becoming visible. And that transition can be a bit shocking for the person. Okay. Another way that this technology is utilized is for any kind of beings that are immersing themselves in the terrestrial plane. They also are shape shifting. They, from their original true form in this dimensional timeline, meaning in this congruent, simultaneous life, they are coming as that form into this dimensional timeline, and they take the body of a physical body in order to mesh in with the human race. So that is also another thing. Sometimes I have seen the eyes
mm,
of certain beings change into reptilian form
yes,
in the human in front of
yes,
you.
yes.
This is very much true for a lot of older lines that go down the draconian reptilian lineages, and a lot of these more preserved heavy bloodlines that are in power, they tend to keep their forms. They are shifting within these forms. Okay, these are like the darker shadow kind of government aspects. Another reason why this is occurring in ET contact is exactly for what you mentioned, to prevent fearing. Why? Because when a human is taking on board a craft, the emotional ranges of the human from a three-dimensional plane are extremely heavy. The vibrational frequency is very slow and very low. And in a sense, heavy emotions, they can it's almost as if, I want to use the word polluting, but please don't take that in a way where emotions are wrong, because that's not the
Yeah.
right thing. It's just that when the human goes into panic, we come into the heavy emotion and it's very heavy. And the vibrational frequency that these beings are at is incredibly high. So it's almost as if you pollute that space. They remove you out of that emotion immediately.
Mm,
They do it to a lot of contactees when they come into panic
mm,
because they don't want to feel that. They don't want that in their space. It's unnecessary. And also, the screening does assist with that sometimes. Um, for this child that was presented, for example, to Priscilla, the purpose of that screening is in order for her to get a cues, because there was a connection with the ET already, the imagery of the
Yeah,
ET, right? And so if they just showed her the child, she wouldn't have understood that connection.
that's
It
true. I
was
never thought of it that
necessary.
way. I never
Yeah.
thought of it that way.
So these little kind of things that are necessary for the human mind to process complex information is why it's utilized. Thank you for that question.
A great question.
Yeah.
So I know we're coming
Yes.
up on the hour. Can you hang out for like a couple minutes afterwards
Yeah,
after we
yeah,
exit the
I
live?
have time, no problem.
Okay. I
Yeah.
just have a kind of a personal question, but
Yeah, yeah. Of
so
course.
thank you for coming on. Where do people find you? I feel like you're gonna have to come on a few more times because
There's a
um,
lot.
there's layers and layers, and you can. So I have your website inside the description, your main one, and from there can they find everything else?
Yeah, so if you want to get a hypnotherapy or a DNA reprogramming with me, you can visit geraldineorozco.com. And if you would like to, please, if you go to the website and book right now, I am fully booked until January of next year, going into February. So if you don't see any dates, please scroll into February for appointments. If you would like to join the support group, hybridmother.com, if you're a contactee or a hybrid mother, you can join our monthly, our bi-monthly now support group. The beginning of the month, we have a support group where we connect with people around the world and talk about contact and get deep into topics. And the second part of the month, we go into a workshop. Last month, we had one where we drew our contact experience. It was amazing.
I saw
Um,
that, and I saw it after it happened. I was like, oh, that
oh,
would
I
have
wish
been
you would
so
come, but
cool.
we'll have it again. Yeah, we'll
Okay.
have it again. This month, now it's already November, we have another one where we're going to talk about light language and we're going to process writing our light language. We're going to channel and tune into that. A lot of people that have contact already speak a certain language. We just want to understand what's the vibrational frequency about that and what that is. So we'll do a workshop on that this month. So please feel free to join on those. And you can also see my YouTube channel, Geraldine Orozco, and anywhere else. Thank
Oh,
you.
it's great for meditation, guys. If you need a meditation, like if you're looking into healing your energy body, and even some of them are very like anybody could do some of them, you know, even if they're not interested in that, which you should be. But her meditations are great, and don't
Thank
lay
you.
down when you do it. They'll put you to sleep in a good way. And I'm sure she needs a disclaimer saying, if you astral project while falling asleep to my meditation, because yeah, that was another experience when doing one of your meditations. I was awake, but something crazy happened. But yes, so
Wow.
please follow her on Instagram and her YouTube channel. And you're not on Twitter. Are you on Twitter?
I am.
Or
I
not?
am. It's called what is it again? It's called Intro Alchemy. At Intro
Okay.
Alchemy. Yeah, you can find me there.
Okay, and I'll add all of your links later. I just put your main website because I figured if they find that, you'll have
Yeah,
links to your places
exactly.
there too.
Yes. Thank
All
you
right,
so much, Priscilla. It was such an
thank
honor to be here
you,
with
and thank
you,
you
and thank you for
everybody.
sharing your stories.
And thank you so much, and thanks everybody that came. Some people came late. I will have her on again. Alien Girl, Spaghetti, Big Willie. Oh, now we have another question. So, do you want to answer one more? Or are you?
Yeah, yeah, we can answer.
So
Sure.
Big Willie asks, why are men not as involved, or maybe you don't like hear it as much, or
Actually, they're quite involved. It's just that I think men are more um, shy and careful about sharing their experience. There are many men that contact me and talk about their contact experience. Everything from people that are working in the stock exchange to Hollywood to people that are just regular everyday business people. Men that are occurring and they've gone to a psychiatrist, they've gone to a psychologist because they don't know what to do with these experiences, and they do have PTSD as a result of them. And sometimes it even affects their sexual life because they have these screen experiences. Sometimes they have the introduction to the children, and they just don't know what to make of that, right? And I think the sharing of men in these cases is essential to understanding another part of the contact experience, because they are also experiencing extraction of genetic information, and they do so in many different ways. Okay, and the children are being presented to them. The funny thing is that a lot of times for the dreams that I hear over and over again, they won't understand the connection, right? It won't be as clear as for a woman when she's gestating a child and then the child is brought to them or they're introduced to a little child. They can make that connection. But for men, it's a little more disconnected because the dream oftentimes can be a sexual dream and then later on can be something that is a presentation or just a child that will show up in the dream. So it's hard to make that connection for them until you put together all of these pieces. But men are very much a part of the picture. So if you're a man that's a contactee that has these experiences, reach out and feel free to join the group. It is safe. It is a place for you to share your experiences without fear. And it's important for us to learn what you're experiencing.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for asking that question. I actually wanted to ask that, and then I got absorbed into one of your answers and forgot about it. So
Thank
thanks for
you.
joining us, Lily, and I will see everybody on Wednesday. I have Truth Sika. He's coming on. He's Christian mysticist, and he is also a musician. He's a healer. He does all these cool things. He has a podcast. So he will be on my channel on Wednesday night. And Geraldine, what's the next thing that you have coming up? I know you said you're doing your support groups with light language, but would you have
Yes.
anything else coming up that you want to tell us about before we get
Um,
off?
You know what? I'm actually going to be speaking at the Mindfulness FMBR. If you guys go to the YouTube channel FMBR, it's a research for consciousness and mindfulness on the 11th. It's a big day, 11/11, and I'll be going deep into the hybridization programmed holographic DNA and the structure of the universe. That's what I'll be speaking at then, so you can join me there as well.
Oh, wow.
I don't remember right now off the top of my head, unfortunately, but please do check out my Instagram. That's usually where I post things that are occurring. Thank
And I'll
you
share
so
it in my
much.
story too, guys. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. Have a great night. Don't go anywhere, Geraldine. I have one more question,
Okay,
and
okay.
I'll see you guys Wednesday.
Hey, bye, everyone. Thank you so much.